All right there, everyone. The French Parliament has voted to actually replace the words mother and father with parent one and parent two in all documents used in their education system. That's what we'll be talking about on today's video. Yes, indeed, you heard that right. As if France didn't have enough problems that their parliament needed to deal with, especially in light of the fact that as of the making of this video, the Yellow Vest Uprising is now in its 14th week. It's closing in on 4 months of straight protests that show no sign of letting up anytime soon. No, instead of dealing with the issues that really matter to the voters of France, instead, the parliament decided to approve brand new standardized parental names aimed at ending discrimination against same-sex parents. This was legislation that was pushed by Emmanuel Macron, the president, or at least Macron's party, En Marche, and representatives of that party, which, by the way, as I speak, is collapsing in terms of its popular support. The last poll showed them at around 15% support. But a representative of this party said that this amendment aims to root in the law family diversity that now characterizes French society. This is an official measurement of social equality. You know, we're going to be talking about this on Thursday night's live stream on this channel. Alexander Solzhenitsyn recognized this back in 1978. He recognized that this whole notion of equality with the rule of law that secular globalists are always putting forward actually replaces, it dislocates a nation's customs, culture, and traditions in favor of a new set of so-called human rights that are invented. I mean, these rights are actually fabricated by a globalist elite, a secular aristocracy, and it's used as one of the primary means by which a globalist world order buries all unique customs, cultures, traditions, religions, ways of life that have characterized national identities for generations. And that's simply because these cultures, customs, and traditions operate according to a very different conception of the law and legal systems that saw inheritance and moral obligation as far more important than this globalist concept of social equalities conforming to a standardized and depersonalized one-size-fits-all legal system. So we're going to be talking about this in detail. It's pretty deep, but it's going to be awesome. Thursday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, U.S., so don't miss it. And so, of course, this is all about social equality. Social equality is determined by the corporatist globalist elites, the technocrats that run this mass globalist technological and telecommunicative world system. Now, the irony in all this, as conservative members of France's parliament have pointed out, at most we're dealing with 5% of the population. They cited statistics that found that over 95% of French families were in fact comprised of moms and dads. Stunning, I know. But they wonder quite rightly why the terms mother and father have to disappear for circumstances that affect less than 5% of French families. Moreover, at a much deeper level, critics are claiming that this is just another example of the myriad of ways in which globalized detraditionalization and standardization just dehumanizes populations, turning them into nameless and faceless statistics. Well, I guess it's easier to control them that way, right? A mother and a father are, of course, radically personalized and intrinsic to what it means to be human. But don't tell the French members of parliament that. Also, if you think it through, who precisely is parent number one anyway? I mean, if the child is adopted, it's not as though one of the parents has priority over the other, do they? Who gets the role of parent one? It's a very odd choice of terms applying some kind of priority. Parent one and, well, you're just parent two. Well, nevertheless. Now, of course, you know, at one level, we just have to laugh at this. I mean, you really do. You just have to laugh at how... I saw a great meme on Twitter. I don't know who put it together, but it was hilarious. It was a picture of the scene in The Empire Strikes Back, when Darth Vader reveals to Luke Skywalker that he's his father. And the meme has Darth Vader saying, "Je suis ton parent un." And Luke Skywalker screams, "No! Parent un." I mean, it's hilarious. We got to do a whole video on just the nature of memes, particularly conservative memes. They're so funny. I think Jordan Peterson actually did that, right? With Pepe the Frog. But at another level, These measures taken by the French Parliament are quite revealing as to what globalism really is and how it really does redefine the whole nature of how we actually view reality. What we have to understand is that globalization fosters what we call a nature-culture dichotomy. Okay, it's very, very important to understand because I think it explains a lot. Globalization fosters this thing called a nature-culture dichotomy. Historically speaking, before the rise of the modern age and globalization, world populations were characterized by something that scholars call cosmic piety. And cosmic piety is this notion that the world is filled with divine meaning and purpose, and therefore everyone born into the world is born into a divine obligation. We're all obliged to conform our lives into a harmonious relationship with that divine meaning and purpose. So this is why, for example, wisdom and virtue were so important in the classical and Christian worlds. Wisdom involved discerning the divine meaning and purpose in all things, while virtue involved aligning my loves with that divine meaning and purpose so that I love what's truly lovely and I desire what's truly desirable and hence experience my ultimate human flourishing. And this is also why culture was so important, because culture was the material mediator between the individual human person and the divine meaning and purpose all around us. Culture, through its art and architecture and literature and music and poetry and its politics and its mathematics and its fashion and its gender distinction, its family order and the like, it all served to facilitate a harmonization with the divine meaning and purpose that's all around us. This is the classical notion of culture that you see throughout Europe and Asia and Africa and the like. Culture was understood as the tangible, material, social embodiment of the divine meaning and purpose embedded in the cosmos that functioned as a social and civic mediator between the divine meaning and purpose and the human individual person. So culture made the divine meaning and purpose inherent in nature explicit so as to facilitate cosmic piety, a harmonious relation with the divine meaning and purpose embedded in the created order. However, with the advent of the modern age and globalization, modern science was enshrined as the one-size-fits-all form of knowledge for all peoples, times, and places. And what this meant is that nature lost its divine meaning and purpose since you couldn't put meaning under a microscope. And so nature got reduced to being comprised of nothing more than biological, chemical, and physical causal laws. And so in this sense, then, modern science, in effect, exposed all value systems as mere cultural fabrications. Scientific rationalism, this one-size-fits-all understanding of the world, had supposedly uncovered the fact that the world is not governed by God or the gods or any divine meaning or purpose, but rather solely by physical, chemical, and biological causal laws. We are not born into a world of divine obligation, according to the modernists. No, objective values are merely culturally specific meaning systems contrived by humans and imposed on otherwise meaningless cause and effect processes. So what then is culture in this modernist globalist conception of things? Well, culture is simply the various ways in which populations project meaning onto otherwise meaningless natural processes. Nature is meaningless. Culture is meaningful. Nature is biologically, chemically, and physically determined, whereas culture is merely humanly determined. Nature is comprised of facts, while culture is comprised of faith and beliefs, right? You see, this is what's known as the nature-culture dichotomy. And what we're seeing here in France, as well as in the United States and much of Europe, is that this nature-culture dichotomy is working itself out into a sex-gender dichotomy. In other words, one's sex is biologically determined, but one's gender is a matter solely of cultural identity and interpretation. In a globalist world, you and I now supposedly have the freedom to determine for ourselves what identity categories are going to characterize our own sovereignly selected identity, right? Now, of course, historically, one's biology was intrinsic to one's identity. If you had a male body, you tended to be identified as a man. What a thought, right? I know. there really was a time when if you had female anatomy, you really were identified as a woman. But now with a nature-culture dichotomy as the foundation for life, we can actually separate sex, which is biological, from gender, which is cultural. Now, one's identity actually transcends one's biology. So this is one of the most profound ways in which modernist globalism has radically changed our perception of reality and our understanding of what it means to be human. And these French parliamentarians who voted to replace mother and father with parent one and parent two are simply fulfilling their globalist job description. They're actively amputating French life away from traditionalist culture and custom and recalibrating it around globalist modernist norms. And if you don't like it, well, then you're a transphobe or homophobe or bigot or intolerant or whatever. Now, the good news in all of this is that France is actually going through a bit of a conservative baby boom. 30% of French women, predominantly conservative Catholic, are responsible for over 50% of all births in France. So only about 30% of women in France have 3 or more children, but they're responsible for over 50% of all births, right? French births. And as I document in my new book that should be coming out next week, scholars are already noticing that this fertility advantage that conservative men and women have over liberal leftists may in fact be one key explanation for why we're seeing the rise of the so-called far right in Europe, the nationalist, populist, traditionalist right. We have statistics that show that young people between the ages of 18 to 26 have some of the most conservative beliefs ever recorded among young people. This is particularly true in Poland. And again, what seems to explain this is that this new generation of young people is coming disproportionately from conservative families. So all of this is to say that I think this change in parental terminology in France is really just part of the last hurrah that secular globalists are getting before their inevitable demographic demise. As always, please like, comment, and subscribe. Check out some of our new merchandise on the link below. Like I said, we have some great new God, Emperor, Trump mugs and t-shirts you're going to love. And please click on either our Patreon, subscribe to our PayPal links below, become a supporter of this channel, and help us to continue to analyze current events in light of awesome conservative trends so that you can personally and professionally flourish. God bless.